you doing, folks? Today I got another Lipo battery review. In addition to just checking out a new battery that I just come in, the connector is also going to need to be changed. And although I'm not going to show you the exact procedure on doing that change, I am going to hit on some highlights and things. You know, if you're looking for some tips on soldering and things like that, I might be able to give you a few. But right now, let's get this box open. We're gonna check it out. This is gonna be my biggest battery by far. Saw some good reviews on it, and I decided to pick one up. Primarily, this is gonna be used in the Kraton 4S over here. So, all right. So let's get rid of the box, and we have a Zeee Power. And this is a 3S 11.1 volt 8000 milliamp 100C discharge is what this is. And supposedly it's a pretty good battery. So what we're going to do is we're going to open it. We're going to have a quick look at it. And we're going to put it on the voltage meter. Nice hard case. 8000 milliamp 100C. Looks pretty good. Got a Dean's connector that's going to be changed to an XT90. So let's check this right out of the box. Cell 1 is at 3.82. Cell 2 is at 3.82. Cell 3 is at 3.82. Looks good. Looks good. Okay, now we're going to try and... oh, that's not what we wanted. You want internal resistance. Wow, really good. Cell 1 is 009, 005, 002. That's really low. This looks like a good battery right out of the box. But what we're going to do now is we're going to mainly concentrate on getting this swapped out, and I'm going to start and stop the video and just talk to you about a few things that I look out for and a few things that I do. So before we close this part out, let me grab one of my other batteries to see how it compares. This is an HRB battery. This is 5000 milliamps, and generally HRBs are a lot longer than other batteries. And yep, it's going to be longer than what this is, which is no problem. The battery trays in all of my cars, they have a spacer in them. If you take the spacer out, the HRBs fit perfectly. So this one clearly is going to need that spacer in there, just so it doesn't flop around a little bit. But I don't see any problem with that battery fitting inside the tray of the Kraton. And it's nice it's hard packed, because I do have a bunch of soft packs, but I really don't bash them all that hard. So, alright, let's get on with the rest of this. Alright, I just wanted to go over a couple of things here. First of all, here's the XT90 connector, and I was lucky to find one of these. This is my last one of the cap that goes on the back of the XT90 connectors. By having this, I don't have to use any shrink tubing. But the XT90s that I bought, they all came without this, and I bought like 20 of them. So this is my last one, and I'm going to use it on this particular application. You know, after it's all soldered, all I'm going to do is just snap that on, and then it just makes a nice little connector. So here's my soldering station. This is a Weller unit. It has adjustable power on it. Nice soldering iron. You get this about 40 or 45 bucks on Amazon. I had just a regular pencil one that I used for the longest time. But I decided to upgrade and get another one. And a couple of other things, rosin core solder. That's a must, obviously. We've got some plate and paste flux here, and we have a tip cleaner here. This here is the way to go. If you're going to do any soldering at all, I don't care what iron it is that you have, you need to have one of these. And to be honest with you, you know, any soldering iron will do this job. And most of the fault of soldering irons is the iron itself, the tip, and the care that you take of the tip. Now, I don't know if you can see that or not, but this tip has a coating of solder all over it. And I do that before I put it away. If you leave this tip exposed, or heaven forbid, you take sandpaper to it, Scotch-Brite to it, take a file to it, if you do any of those things, that tip is done. You'll use it once, it'll never work right again, it will not transfer the heat. So these things come through with some, with a coating on it, the whole tip does, but proper care of your soldering tip will ensure it will operate perfectly every single time. And you know, when this is hot and up to temperature, all you do is you take this and you stick it in here and just do this. And it gets all that stuff off of there. Take it, stick it in your flux, put a little bit of solder on the tip, take it in here and do it again. Keep doing that. But the last thing that you want to do is put it in the solder, in the flux. And then you're going to put a little bit of solder on it. You're going to put it in here and you're going to shut it off. Let it cool off with all that flux on there and all of the solder on there. Let it cool off. What it does is it puts a coating on the end of that tip so that the oxygen doesn't get at it and really mess up this tip and put all kinds of oxidation and everything on it. Because if you don't take care of the tip, it's not going to have good heat transfer. Now, one of the reasons why I got this, it has adjustable power on it. Some of these connectors here, when you're using another soldering iron, and what I used to do because of this, I used to just cut this off. And then I would strip the wires, I'd retin the wires, and then I'd use that. And the reason for that is that for some reason, some of these manufacturers, it seems like they're using a solder that's at a much higher temperature than what the common soldering iron is going to heat up to. Meaning if it doesn't get up to the appropriate heat level, okay, it's never going to liquefy the solder on here so that you can just simply remove the connector. And since I got this, I've been able to crank up the temperature, and I think it's about 4 or 4.25, and really let it get nice and hot. And I just need to work it a little bit, and eventually it will liquefy the solder that's on these, and I can just pop this Dean's connector right off. And my tips are already pre-soldered, and it'll be all ready to go. But other than that, okay, other than these types of connectors, basically all the other soldering that you're going to do on your truck or your motor connections, or I have drones up here that I do a lot of little battery things to. This works perfectly, and it's really a joy to use, especially if you take care of that tip. You will have no trouble just touching that iron to the solder. It liquefies. You can get stuff apart. You can put it back together. There's a smaller tip here that I have. This really comes to a point. And if you notice, there's a big glob of solder on here on the end because that's protecting the tip. Anyway, this one right here is really not used for my RC cars. This is used for my drones because there are a lot of tiny wires in drones. And the circuit boards are really crammed close together. And you know, all the components on the board are close together. And this allows me to really get in there fine tuning, and this works great for the drone. So that just sits right here. Old school method was to use a sponge to keep your tip clean. Don't do it. Don't do it at all. This is the better way to do it. Get one of these. It almost looks like an SOS pad or some kind of Scotch pad or something you'd find in the kitchen. This is the way to clean your tip. Don't wet this. You're supposed to use distilled water on here, but even then, you know, the air gets at the water, the air gets at the sponge, and all you're doing is introducing deposits that can get onto your soldering iron and ruin your tip. So don't use the sponge. Get one of these. And this is called a Hack Tip Cleaner 599B. I got this at the exact same time that I got the Weller. So we're going to plug everything in, get everything heated up and everything, and then I will be back and I'm going to show you just the more important steps as I go through. I'm not going to videotape, the entire procedure on taking this off and putting on the new ones, but you will get the gist of it. But, having a good soldering iron is key to really enjoying soldering, which is a big part of RC cars. Really, the RC hobby in general. You need to learn how to solder. This great unit, it's about 40 bucks. And I picked that up. So we'll be right back. While I'm letting the soldering iron heat up, I've taken the Dean's connector. You see I have this little bench vise, and I've just gently put the Dean's connector in here, and I've stripped away the shrink tubing off of the negative side, and that's the one I'm gonna go for first. And I'm looking at the solder here. This does not look like that high temp solder that I've seen on some other ones. So this is probably going to come off pretty easily. And that way, it still saves me some length, and without having to cut the wires on the battery. So want to show you that. We're still waiting for this to heat up. Be a couple more minutes, and we'll continue. Alright, so we got the negative off, and it did take a little coercion to get it to come off. Took quite a while for that solder to liquefy on there, even when this turned up to about 4.25. So we have the negative off. I'm going to strip off the shrink tube on the positive, and we're going to take that off. And it does look like I'm going to need to strip some shielding off of these wires. These wires are going to be a little bit too short to mate up with the XT90, so we'll trim some of that off too. All right, the positive is off. As you can see, we have the two wires. Obviously, don't let them touch together. You're gonna have to keep them away. Just naturally, as it sits there, it wants to spread apart. So that's good for me. So we'll put those there. We got a Dean's connector here, and this is still in good shape. I'm gonna put this in the bag with all my Dean's connectors, and if I ever need one, I have one here. That's the other nice thing about having a good soldering iron, to remove the wires directly from the battery, so that now in case I need it, because some of my crawlers I use these as well. So but the tip, notice the tip is a little bit dirty, so you stick it in here, and then we stab it in here a few times and coat it with some solder, and look at that. It's all ready to be used. That looks good. All right, we're gonna strip some shielding off of here, and we're gonna prep the XT90s. I have some of the shielding taken off here, and one of the things that I've noticed here is when they tin these wires, they actually did a lousy job at it. All this solder right on the tip here has not wicked up into the wire inside the shielding. It should have wicked right up inside, and this one should have wicked up too. If you notice, it's just on the end, and then this is all bare wire. And you always want to pre-tin all of your connections. So we have a positive and negative here. These need to be pre-tinned with solder. They need to be heated up and allow the solder to get in there. You don't need a lot on there. It doesn't need to be globbed on like it is right here. We're going to kind of smooth this out a little bit. But also on this side, and this is the negative, and this is the positive. XT90s happen to tell you which side is which, okay? And as you can see, there is no solder in here. But what we're going to do before we actually solder the wire to the connector, we're going to tin them, and that's just putting some solder in there and getting this hot enough so that the solder liquefies and it sticks to it. And then what we're going to do, we don't have to really worry too much about trying to put more solder on here. When we heat up these two connections, they're just going to kind of blend right together, and when it cools off, it will be nice solid connection between the two of them. So we're going to wick these wires here and get some of that solder up in the wire, and maybe I'll do this too, and when I come back, all of this will be done. Okay, we've wicked the ends, and that worked out pretty well. The solder pulled right up into the wire and into the insulation up inside. And we also did each side of the XT90 connector. If you can see, there's some solder in there, there's some solder in here, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount them in here. I'll mount this in here, and we can do the positive first. Just nice and easy, doesn't have to be tight or anything. One of the things you can't forget to do, can't forget to put this on. This needs to go on first. Take this and slide it all the way down, so that after this is connected, you just slide this up and it's going to snap in here and it's going to protect your wires. So, all right, let's hope this all goes well, and be back in a second. All right, I just finished the negative cable. Both of these are done. Negative cable still a little bit warm, but I'm really pleased with how this came out. These connections look really good. These are not going to come apart. A nice solid connection between the two. Now you might not be able to see that all that well, but there's the negative, positive. And when I hit the heat on both of those, I did not use this at all, because I had pre-tinned the wires and I pre-tinned the connector. So all I had to do was add heat to it, wait for it to liquefy, make sure that both pieces liquefy, otherwise you'll get what's called a cold solder. And you know, one side did not liquefy and the other side did, and people jam them together and then take the heat off. And you know, both sides did not have a chance to completely liquefy, and you do want to do that. And that, sometimes when you're holding a wire, you know, with your fingers, which is how I do it, that wire tends to get really hot, making sure that both pieces have liquefied before you take the soldering iron away. So, you know, while I'm connecting the pieces, I'm never trying to fumble with this either. So, you know, one hand has the soldering iron, the other one has is holding the wire, and this little bench vise here is holding the connector. Now, a lot of people, they'll take a piece of wood and they'll put some holes in it and make a contraption to hold this. And you know, there's some places out there that actually sell, you know, battery hold connectors so you can solder them. But I have used this for 30 years. I've had this. And it actually came off of a drill press. This is a vise to be attached to a drill press. But this is the way I have always done my soldering when I've needed to do any kind of connectors. So some people may be saying, "Oh, that's not the right way to do it." You know what? It's the way that I do it, and it works. And as you can see, those look pretty good. I'm going to clean up some of the flux off of there. But before we sign off, I'm going to show you. Now take this, push it up. This should snap right in here. Look at that, right in there. We are all set to go. There's red. This is positive. Black, negative. This battery is now ready to be used in the Creighton. And that took all of, I mean, with the videotaping and everything, probably 20 minutes for me to do that. So if you take the videotaping away, you're talking 10 or 15 minutes to put a connector on that, and that includes waiting for the soldering iron to heat up. So last thing to do, and now if you notice, that tip is all dull. It's all dull looking. So what we're going to do is we're going to get that. Oh, we need to turn this down a little bit, and we're going to take this and we're just going to stick it in there. And notice that's all nice and shiny now. So we're going to put it in some flux again. And we're going to clean it. Okay, that looks really good. I don't know if you can see that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to coat it with solder. Nice little bubble on there. Put it inside its holder, shut it off. Let it cool off that way. Let that solder just sit on there, and that's going to protect your tip until you're ready to use it again. And it'll be in perfect condition, waiting for you. And I can't say enough, and a lot of people do this because they're soldering iron. Oh, it's got gunk all over it, blah, blah, blah. Do not take sandpaper, emery cloth, an emery board, a file, sandpaper, Scotch-Brite, anything. Don't do anything to the tip of it. Do not scrape it in any way. That's the proper way to clean it. Get yourself one of these. It's only a couple bucks. Get yourself some good flux. That makes the solder flow, by the way. Not only does it help clean everything, but you know, you keep everything fluxed up. And you know, when I did the wires, what I didn't show you was just before I tinned the wires, I took the wire and I stuck it right into the flux. And I coated that whole wire with flux. I hit the iron to it, and within a few seconds, just everything just started to flow. Flux is your friend. Get some good stuff. Get one of these and get yourself some good rosin core solder, and you'll be soldering all kinds of stuff because you'll be so excited about it. So, anyways, I hope that was all helpful. Looking forward to running this 8000mah battery in this Creighton with a 100C discharge. I'm hoping it works out good. So far, it does look good. We're going to put a charge on it now that we got the right connectors. And hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you on the next one.